Alright, so took me a bit to figure it out, but I think I got a pretty good looking solution for the front canopy. Front canopy took a lot of time to make it look right because it is going to be one of those things that it's got to look perfect. It's going to be one of the things that you see most of the time. Let me walk you through how we accomplished that. So I'm going to roll back to before we did that test volume. So we've got sketch 11, which, if I show you that here, is based on a plane that is between this point, and parallel to our right plane, which in this case it's actually the front plane. And then I draw the front cross section of the canopy at that point. Okay, then we progress to sketch 12, which is on a plane that is between these 2 points and again parallel to the previous plane we made. The reason why we split the operation into 2 steps like this, where we have a loft going between these two and then going to the front, is because sometimes SolidWorks will struggle to figure out what you're trying to accomplish with the geometry. So splitting it up into a couple more steps will give you a nicer result. Now, there's another sketch going on here. That's sketch 10. Let's show that one. Sketch 10 is a projection of sketch 2. And sketch 2 is the main layout sketch that we did at the very beginning of this process. So I created a plane between this point here and the back points on the canopy. So you need at least 3 points to define a plane. You may remember that from good old math classes. And then I project this curve onto that plane, basically just by copying the geometry into a new sketch, and that's what sketch 10 is. And, oops, where'd it go? The reason why that's important, oh boy. Let's just do this. The reason why that's important is this then gives us a line that kind of nicely guides the contour of our glass up towards the nose like we want it to. So what we then do is a loft between those 2 things, which if I go into the edit feature, you can get an idea as to how that looks. So you have sketch 11 back there, and then we have part of sketch 12 up here, and then we select these different lines in pink to act as guide curves. If I got rid of one of them, like okay, so let's get rid of group 3 for instance. You can see how it shifts that in. That's because the geometry is not being kind of vacuum formed to that line. So I'm just going to hit X to not change anything. But you can see how it's nicely conforming to that line. So we're using a combination of a couple sketches and then some guide curves to create this nice sloped look. And then to get the front corner, we're doing a very similar thing. But instead of doing the whole cross section, we then split it up into half. So we have sketch 14, which is half of the cross section of the previous sketches we were using, and then we have sketch 13, which is just copying some entities from the 3rd sketch that we did, which is the profile sketch. And then again, we're referencing sketch 10 because we are using it as a guide. But very similar process. You create a loft between those 2, and that gives you the front corner. And then if I suppress this mirror, you can see what the final result of that was. So you get a nice looking front piece there. And then if we unsuppress that, mirror literally just takes the geometry over here, copies it over here. And then our shell, this is what makes everything hollow. So I can change a couple parameters here. Maybe I want this to be 0.05 centimeters, which would result in thinner glass. I can do that, but that basically just hollows everything out. And this is, if we were to scale this back up to full size, this is 0.1 centimeters, which would be glass that is 10 centimeters thick. That's some pretty thick glass. But you got to keep in mind we're shrinking this down and then we're going to 3D print this. So I want to give myself enough geometry to have it reliably print well. At the moment, I only have an FDM printer, and I print with a 0.06 millimeter nozzle, and I don't really want to change that. So having it be 0.1 centimeters or 1 millimeter in thickness, that's going to give me a nice enough geometry that I can print this pretty well. There you go. That is our front canopy. Now we just need to work on getting the rest of the ship. Happy holidays, everybody. This is Odd Job from the cutting room floor, editing bay, talking to you now. And one of the things that I wanted to point out is when you're working as an engineer, everything that I have been able to see would indicate that you generally work on a team, right? So you wouldn't typically be designing an entire spaceship yourself, but this is just a fun project to work on. So that's why we're taking this on, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. But typically you would have a whole host of people with different talents, different specialties to work on a project like this. I will be the first to admit that I am not the greatest when it comes to design. And I'm still very much a novice modeler when it comes to SolidWorks. So this would be a point where I would probably want to talk to the senior engineer on my team and ask him, hey, how do I accomplish this stuff? And you know, you'll find these guys with years and years of experience, and generally speaking, the people that I've interacted with are always happy to help. But there would also be quite a bit more exploration having gone on before we get to this point, in the form of more sketches and drawings, probably some preliminary models. We're kind of trying to shove everything into as little time as possible in order to get this project done in a timely manner for YouTube. But what you see me doing on screen is called a chamfer, and I think I talk about this in the next segment. This is generally something that you want to leave towards the very end. Chamfers do get rather messy if you add them in too early, because they depend on the geometry that they're interacting with in order to define themselves. So if you go back and change that geometry, the chamfer will no longer work. And I do run into that a little further on in the project, but what can I say? Lessons to be learned, I guess. But basically we're creating some sketches to kind of slim up the body a little bit, make it a little less chunky compared to the original design sketch. We still need to maintain enough volume for the interior that we've planned for. So it's still going to be a little bit of a chunky boy, but we can put him a bit on a diet. And adding in some more chamfers, purely for aesthetic reasons, just trying to slim down that front profile, make it more pointed and sharp like an arrowhead. But again, you should do your chamfers at the very end of your design process. After you've got all the more basic shapes defined, then you can go in and pretty them up with chamfers. You're not supposed to use them to define so much of the large geometry like I'm doing here. Making a little inset for where the turret is going to be in the future, and then just cleaning up some of the edges where they intersect with our canopy shape. But this is looking pretty good for the front of the ship, and just adding some few finishing touches on that. But I think we're about ready to call the front of the ship good. Alright, so as you can tell, we've got quite a bit of the front part of the fuselage modeled. I've got these transparent shapes that are basically a mock-up of the floor plan. There are some collision points that we'll need to fix in either the skin of the ship or the floor plan itself. I'm leaning towards fixing it in the floor plan because this room is quite wide at the moment, and I think if we just scooch this wall in a bit, that will kind of fix everything for us without making things feel too tight. And I'm gonna go ahead and tell you that I did break one of the rules with parametric modeling. You see all these chamfers in the tree. Chamfering is one of those things that you want to do kind of last, but I'm using it as a way to kind of cheat some angular geometry pretty easily, so that I can then add more detail quickly. And the reason why you want to do chamfering last is because very quickly it stacks on top of each other, and then if I were to go and delete this one, for instance, it's telling me that there's these other things that are dependent on that, and so I would have to go back and fix each of those as well. So on a professional project, you wouldn't really want to do that. You would want to just figure out the more methodical way to get the geometry that you're wanting. But since we are kind of just exploring shapes with SolidWorks, it's not going to make too much of a difference here. There are definitely better ways to achieve this same look. But the plan is basically get the shape roughed out and then add a bunch of detail to it as we go on. Right about here, I'd like to add some windows, and I think that they're going to just be kind of inset. So there will be a cutout here that goes straight down, and then you'll have this window that is vertical looking into the main corridor that we have there. We've got a cutout here. This is where our turret is going to sit on the top. We can put another turret down here at the bottom. We've got the space around our snub fighter hangar built out, so that's pretty cool. And yeah, I think it's coming right along, slowly but surely. I think we're starting to see this take shape. All right, this is as good a spot to pick up as any. So one of the issues that we have is the cutout volume for the room inside is a little bit too wide. And if I want to shrink that down, I can make this 5. But then you notice how everything else changed a little bit too. So this is a good example of how not to do your sketch, because clearly one of these references is causing the front of the ship to be linked to this width back here. If I had to guess, it's probably because I have this dimension and this dimension tied here, but I'm not sure. In any case, if we go to exit sketch and we do the continue to ignore, we see that a lot of our chamfers broke, which is another reason why you're supposed to wait until the end to do chamfers. But I'm not going to do that, and I certainly don't want to redo all this work. So we're just going to set it back to 6.5 and then let the chamfers fix themselves. When it comes time to do a subtraction in order to create the volumes for the rooms, we're just going to have to probably redesign the room itself. I think that'll be the easier route to go with. We're going to work on getting the rest of the main geometry in place today. And I say today, I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do the release schedule for these videos, but from my perspective, it's been a few days since I worked on this again. But I'd like to get a pretty good idea of what the back of the ship looks like, and then figure out some geometry to connect it, perhaps towards the end. So let's get going on that. Alright, well, I guess the last section didn't record. Oh boy. As you can tell, I've got some work done. The way that we did this is very similar to the front piece, but the front had quite a bit more angular detail. The back half is basically just a big box with extra steps because it's got the cargo bay there. But if we come down here, we can see that I created several planes. Let's see, let's just go through and show these real quick. Oh no, I don't need to show those ones. And so basically, we create a... let's show that one too. There we go. So I went ahead and created 1, 2, 3, 4 planes and a sketch on each of them to basically help guide this shape as it works its way to the back. There is some wonkiness going on, so I might need to adjust some of those sketches just a little bit. I'm using the top and side sketch as guide curves, and that is likely contributing to that. Just because the... Well, actually, I'm not totally sure why this line is slanted. But we can fix that. But that's basically the process that I did. I might need to make some tweaks. Back here, you can see that in the original sketch we intended on this being kind of curved. So we can do that pretty easily just by adding a fillet. I don't think I'm going to be too picky on the on making it match that contour. But yeah, just some more things to play with. Now I need to work on refining the shape a little bit and then figure out our connecting geometry. Alright, so let's take a little breather. I added some portholes. That's the word for windows on a ship, right? Portholes? Anyways, we got some windows here. Windows are really nice for a lot of reasons. One, obviously you can see through them. But two, imagine if your ship loses power. This is going to be your only source of light in those cases, so having windows is also bit of a utility and safety feature. So I'd like to see a bit more windows added onto the civilian vessel like the Constellation is. We've got some connecting geometry for the middle of our ship to create that little bit of a neck. Obviously we are still missing the engines. Those are going to be designed separately, and then we're going to add those in what's called an assembly file. But I feel like this is looking pretty good. It's departed a little bit from where the original sketch was, but I kind of like the direction that it's going, so I'm just going to keep rolling with it. Now, feature-wise, one thing I do want to implement is adding a kind of rail for the engines to glide on. that will make it so that hopefully we can get the bottom engines underneath the center of gravity of the ship for when it's landed. That will reduce a lot of the stability issues that the Connie has, which many people have pointed out is an issue. So I'm going to have to brainstorm a little bit on how I want to accomplish that, but otherwise I think we're in a pretty good spot. I think this is a point where I'm going to upload another video and collect some more feedback from you guys. So tell me what you think about the shape so far. The biggest critique I've seen on the series at this point is that it's very chunky. Well, yeah, it's a constellation, so it's going to be a chunky boy. But is there anything that you don't like about what you're seeing so far? What things would you like to see added to the constellation? Let's talk about it down below. But until next time, this is Odd Job Entertainment, signing off.